I walked into my own home, expecting love, but instead I heard my daughter and her husband whispering about sending me to Sunset Manor and splitting the $700,000 from my house. The pain nearly crushed me, but they never knew my hearing had returned. They thought I was powerless, but this was only the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room of my house, the place Margaret and I had built our lives in for more than 30 years. The afternoon light came through the curtains in slanted lines, warming the hardwood floor that I had once installed with my own hands. Every corner of this $600,000 home carried a memory, from the family photos on the mantel to the scratch marks on the staircase banister where Jessica used to slide down as a child. Yet that same home, the heart of my life, had now become the very thing my daughter wanted to steal from me. The betrayal pressed against my chest like a weight I could not shake off. As I leaned back in my chair, my eyes rested on the wedding photo of Margaret and me. Her smile was full of hope and love, and I whispered, "Margaret, if only you could see what is happening now." The silence of the room answered me, a silence that seemed thicker than before because of what I had overheard earlier. My own daughter, the child I had sacrificed so much for, is now plotting with her husband to sell this house and throw me into Sunset Manor as if I were nothing more than an obstacle in her path. I thought back to all the times I had been there for Jessica. I remembered the day she received her acceptance letter to college, tears in her eyes, afraid she couldn't afford to go. Without a second thought, I wrote the checks. $55,000 in tuition payments across 4 years, taken straight from my retirement savings. I had worked overtime shifts, canceled trips with Margaret, and given up things we had dreamed of just so Jessica could have her education. I never once considered it a loan. It was love, pure and simple, a father's duty to give his child every opportunity. Then there was her first car. She was 21, and I remember how excited she was to drive on her own. I had saved and scraped to buy her a used car, a safe one, nothing too fancy but reliable. $20,000 it cost me, money I could have used to renovate the house or add to our savings, but I wanted her to feel independent. She hugged me that day, tears in her eyes, saying she would never forget it. And I believed her. I believed those words the way only a father could. And the wedding. How could I forget? $35,000 spent to give her the perfect day. Margaret was already gone by then, and I wanted Jessica to feel supported, to know her father was still there for her, even when her mother couldn't be. I paid for the dress, the reception, the flowers, and the photographer. I stood at the back of the hall that night, looking at her in her white gown, and thought, "This is worth it, every penny, every sacrifice." I thought she would carry that gratitude for the rest of her life. But as I sat there now, staring at the walls that had once echoed with laughter, I realized how wrong I had been. Gratitude had faded, and in its place was entitlement. Jessica didn't see those sacrifices as gifts. She saw them as obligations, stepping stones toward what she believed was rightfully hers. And now she wanted to take everything. This house, the $180,000 in my savings account, the $120,000 in investments. Nearly $1 million worth of my life's work, ready for her and Chris to grab, all while pushing me aside as if I were nothing more than an old man in the way. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. I pressed my hand against my chest and closed my eyes. "Margaret, you warned me, didn't you? You said she only came around when she needed something. I didn't listen. I thought helping her meant loving her. I thought I was doing the right thing." My voice cracked as I spoke into the empty room. I was blind, Margaret. Blind because I believed she would love me the way I loved her. The memories piled on top of each other, pressing against me. Jessica is crying over student loans and me writing checks without hesitation. Jessica is asking for help with her apartment deposit and me pulling from our savings again. Every time she came to me, I opened my wallet and my heart. And now, when I needed her, she saw me as nothing more than a burden. That word echoed inside me. Burden. The daughter I had given everything to now saw me as disposable. I walked slowly around the room, my hand brushing against the furniture, each piece a story. The couch where Margaret and I sat every Christmas morning, sipping coffee before Jessica came running down to open gifts. The dining table I had refinished myself, where birthday candles were blown out year after year. The grandfather clock in the corner, a wedding gift from Margaret's parents, is still ticking steadily through the years. This was not just a house. It was the physical proof of my life, my marriage, my family, and they wanted to rip it from me. For a long while, I sat in silence, feeling the weight of betrayal, anger, and sorrow. Then something began to shift inside me. At first, it was just a thought, a flicker of resolve, but slowly it grew. I realized I could not let this be the end. I was not helpless. I was not powerless. They thought I was deaf, confused, ready to be pushed aside. But I wasn't. I had strength left. I had clarity. And I had the will to fight for what Margaret and I had built together. I walked to the study, my legs trembling, but my steps firm. Pulling open the filing cabinet, I sifted through years of documents until my fingers found what I was looking for. The insurance policy, the house deed, the savings account statements. Every piece of paper that proved what was mine. As I laid them on the desk, my hands steadied. For the first time in days, I felt control returning to me. On the corner of the desk sat a small business card, one I had kept for years. Robert Henley, attorney at law. He had been there when Margaret passed, helping me sort through her estate. He had told me then that I should update my own will, prepare for the future. At the time, I brushed it aside, too consumed by grief to think about it. Now, his card felt like a lifeline. I picked it up, tracing the ink of his name with my finger. "Robert," I whispered, "I think I'm finally ready to take your advice." My voice was firmer now, stronger. The fear that had held me down earlier was gone. What replaced it was determination. The house was quiet, the late afternoon sun slipping lower, casting long shadows across the floor. I looked once more at Margaret's photo on the mantel. Her eyes, kind and knowing, seemed to look right back at me. "Margaret," I whispered again, "this time I won't let them take what belongs to us. I won't let them erase everything we built." I sat back down at the desk, the papers spread out before me. My heart still ached, the betrayal still burned, but I no longer felt powerless. I was not just a victim of my daughter's greed. I was a man with something worth protecting, and I had the means to fight back. Tomorrow would bring decisions, maybe battles, but tonight I had taken the first step. As I placed the business card beside the stack of documents, I whispered into the fading light, "Margaret, this time I will not be blind. This time I will not be silent. They think I am weak, but they are about to find out how wrong they are." And with that vow, chapter 2 of my life began to close, making way for the storm that was coming. I woke before sunrise in the house Margaret and I had built, and everything felt tilted by the truth I now carried. When knowledge arrives, rooms change shape. The hallway stretched, the air cooled, the carpet thinned under my feet. I practiced the weakness they expected from me, the slow shuffle, the bent shoulders, the soft confusion in my eyes. If Jessica and Chris kept believing I was still deaf and drifting, they would keep talking. I needed them to talk. I needed to hear every word they believed I could not hear. At the kitchen table, Jessica slid a sticky note toward me with a practiced smile. "Oatmeal or eggs?" the note asked in large patient letters. I pointed at the bowl already in her hand while Chris poured coffee and boomed about the day's forecast as though volume proved kindness. I nodded, warmed my hands on the mug, and waited for their routine to carry them toward the sink. When it did, I drifted down the hallway like a shadow and stood over the floor register. Years ago, it carried warm air in winter. This morning, it carried something colder, a line of words that traveled as wire. Clean. "That old burden is up early," Jessica said. She let out a small laugh, the kind people use when they think the room belongs to them. If we push Henderson, we can list by summer. I let the name sit there. Henderson, a doctor with a pen and a stamp. Chris answered like a man reading a spreadsheet. Comps are strong, he said. A light kitchen refresh will push the number. He did not say father. He did not say home. He said square footage and net after fees. I stood still and learned. I climbed a step to the vent's sweet spot, where sound sharpens, and heard paper rustle on the kitchen table. I could see her in my mind, head tilted, pen busy. I'm keeping track, she said. Yesterday, he dropped a glass, and I wrote motor control issues. Last week, he forgot the keys, and I wrote short-term memory decline. Little things add up. When we show this to Henderson, he'll sign. The notebook knocked the wind out of me. She was turning ordinary stumbles into a diagnosis, turning tenderness into bait, turning me into paperwork. I pressed my palm to the wall and kept breathing. Very slowly. I went back to my chair and let the oatmeal cool. Jessica brought it with another note. Call the clinic later? I nodded and ate by habit. When she left, the grief changed shape. It stopped pressing me flat and started bracing my spine. Heavy pack, yes, but one I could carry. By mid-morning, they performed their routine loudly, as if I were a child. They wrote that they would run to the store and asked by gesture if I would be okay alone. I gave a thumbs up and a soft smile. The front door closed, the car rolled away, and the silence changed texture. It became mine. In the study, I lined up what mattered: the deed, the insurance policy, recent statements, my license, and a card I had kept. Robert Henley, attorney at law. He guided me through Margaret's estate and warned me to update my own. When he answered, I spoke, and even. It's me, Robert. I need to change my will today. He asked careful questions that protected us both. They think I can't hear, I said, and they're planning to take what Margaret and I built. Robert exhaled and told me to come at 11:30. Before leaving, I called the bank. I asked for alerts on any withdrawal over $5,000 and for a note to flag attempts to add an authorized user. I told the woman I was juggling appointments and wanted a second set of eyes on my accounts. She said she would note it and mail a confirmation. It wasn't a lock, but it was a latch, and a latch holds until you can brace the door. I placed the papers in a folder, slid it under my jacket, and shuffled to the garage the way Jessica expects me to move. I drove with the radio off and let the quiet set the tone. At a red light, I pictured Jessica's face when she learned the money had moved beyond her reach, when she realized an estate is not a vending machine you kick to get more. I pictured Chris counting a commission that would never come. Then I pictured Margaret's eyes, the way they softened when worry got loud. Worry less, prepare more, she would say. I parked at Robert's office, a converted house with wood trim and a porch that needed sanding, and felt my hand steady around the folder. Robert met me at the door and ushered me inside. We shut his office door, and I placed the documents on his desk in a neat stack. A new will, leaving my entire estate, approximately $750,000, to my son Michael. Jessica is to receive $1,000 for reasons she will understand. Robert studied my face and did what good lawyers do. He asked if I was under duress, if I felt clear, and if the choice was mine. Yes, I said. Yes. He took notes with a fountain pen, then read them back. He recommended a trust for the house and updated powers of attorney so no one could smuggle lies into a clinic. He suggested a short letter of intent in my own voice to sit behind the will. While he drafted, I watched a maple stir outside. When the draft was ready, he slid it across the desk, and we walked through each line. He did not rush me. I initialed where he pointed and paused where memory ached. The paragraph about Jessica was brief and clean, for reasons she will understand. I understood, too, and turned the page. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. On the drive home, I carried a plain envelope on the passenger seat. My street looked ordinary: a delivery van, a kid on a bike, a man with a dog. Ordinary can be a lie. I parked and walked in with a small grocery bag I had picked up for cover. Jessica looked surprised to see me carrying anything heavier than a newspaper. She smiled too brightly and held up a note. "The doctor says we can schedule a home evaluation." I squinted and nodded as if relieved. Then I excused myself with a gesture and climbed the stairs, avoiding the board that always complains. At the vent, I found the same pocket of sound. Their voices drifted up like smoke. Jessica said they should speed things up, that Henderson could come this week if they pressed. Chris said the market was hot and delays cost money. Then Jessica whispered something uglier than the insult. She said she could leave the stove on one afternoon and catch me forgetting, or slip a little something into my tea so I would sleep hard. A few photos, a tidy story. The picture would be complete. I pressed a palm to the wall and breathed. I stayed at the vent until their voices faded, then returned to my chair and let the maple outside steady me. Margaret's wind chime lifted once, then settled. I took that as permission to proceed. The next hours I spent learning my house again. I noted which steps complained and which stayed quiet. I paid attention to how the afternoon light crawled across the family photos. I chose the frames I would box if I needed to think clearly. I checked window latches and the back door, not because I was frightened, but because attention calms the mind. Then I called Michael. A short text had warned him I needed a few minutes. I told him, in measured words, what I had overheard and what I had done. He listened without rushing me and then said he was proud of me. He asked if he should drive over. "Not yet," I said. "Soon, maybe. Let me secure the edges first." His calm steadied me. After we hung up, I walked the perimeter of the house like a man checking a fence after a storm. Everything essential still stood, and the quiet felt earned. I wrote a short list for the morning. Evening brought the routines Jessica liked to perform when she thought I was watching. Tea with honey, a hand on my shoulder at the right moment, notes about soup and medication, and early bedtimes. I nodded and thanked her, each thanks a stone I placed on a path that led where I needed her to walk. She believed a story in which she was the caretaker and I was the grateful old man. Belief makes people careless. Careless people make mistakes. I needed one or two more. After dinner, they settled in the den with the television low and their phones in their laps. I sat at the dining table with a pad and wrote the next steps. Copies, safe deposit box, confirmation calls. I wrote Robert's name and underlined it. I wrote call doctor and crossed it out. I would choose my own doctor when I needed one, on my terms. Near 9, I washed my cup and turned off the kitchen light. In the window, I saw my face, older than I feel, stronger than I expected. A week ago, this would have felt impossible. Now it felt like work, and I have always known how to work. I slept lightly and woke before the alarm. In the blue hour, the house was quiet in a way that made sense. I drove to the copy shop when it opened and made 3 sets of Robert's documents, placing each in a different envelope, one for the safe deposit box, one for me. One for Michael by certified mail. Paper is not love, but sometimes it is protection. Sometimes it is the spine that holds you upright. When I returned, Jessica sat at the table with her notebook. I could see boxes and neat arrows, the script of someone who thinks ink can turn lies into facts. She closed it quickly when she noticed me and wrote a note asking if I wanted toast. I nodded and kept my breathing even. At 10:30, I left again, pantomiming a physical therapy appointment. I met Robert. His staff witnessed the signatures. His notary placed the seal. When I held the folder at the end, the new will, updated powers of attorney, and the trust documents felt heavier than paper. Robert asked if I wanted him to deliver a copy to Michael himself. Yes, I said. He promised to call with confirmation. Back home, the afternoon light lay across the hardwood like a blanket. I set a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter so the truth could arrive without my voice. When the door opened and bags rustled, I folded the paper and let my eyes close as if dozing. There was a pause, a rip, the slide of paper, then a silence, sharp as glass. I pictured her lips shaping numbers, her eyes stopping at the line that gave her $1,000 for reasons she would understand. A chair scraped. Chris hissed a question. Her breathing quickened, then fell into a hard quiet. I stayed still because stillness was power now. They believed movement meant control, noise meant confidence. I was teaching them something else. An hour later, Robert called to confirm the filings and delivery for Michael's copy. By evening, the envelope had vanished, and so had Jessica's bright smile. When I went to bed, I placed my copy in the top drawer and laid Margaret's ring beside it. I turned off the lamp and let the darkness settle. I had taken control. They thought I had lost, but the game had just begun. Tomorrow would test everything again. The morning began like any other, yet I knew it was the day everything would change. The light streamed through the blinds in soft golden stripes, landing on the kitchen table where a single envelope had been resting all night. My hand had placed it there, calm and deliberate, knowing that sooner or later Jessica and Chris would find it. I had slept lightly, listening to every creak in the house, waiting for the moment when footsteps would come down the hall and the performance would begin. When Jessica walked into the kitchen, her hair still tangled from sleep, she poured herself coffee as if nothing in the world could disturb her routine. Chris followed, yawning, rubbing his neck, already asking her if she had spoken to Henderson about the timeline. I remained in my chair in the living room, pretending to fumble with the morning paper, my hearing aid switched on, my senses sharp as a blade. From where I sat, I could see the exact moment Jessica's eyes fell on the envelope. She paused, her body stiffening, then picked it up as if it were heavier than it should have been. She opened it, and the sound of paper sliding against paper echoed louder than any words could. The silence that followed was long, sharp, and then came the sound I had expected all along. A gasp, not the kind that comes from surprise at a birthday party, but the gasp of someone who realizes a carefully built plan is crumbling to dust. Chris leaned over her shoulder, his voice urgent and low. "What is it?" he asked. Jessica read the words with her lips before her voice finally broke into the room. It's a new will. He left everything to Michael. $750,000. The house, the accounts, everything. And me? $1,000. $1,000 for reasons I will understand. Chris snatched the paper, his voice cracking, as he read aloud the words I had signed only the day before. I kept my head down, turning a page of the newspaper as though I hadn't heard a single thing. But inside, my chest swelled with a mixture of sorrow and triumph. I wanted them to feel this moment, to realize they had underestimated me. Jessica's breathing quickened, and then came the sound of paper slamming against the counter. "He can't do this! He can't just change it all!" she shouted. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. I remained still, pretending to struggle with a crossword puzzle, pen tapping on the margin. I let them believe for a moment that perhaps I was too old to understand the weight of what they had just discovered. My silence made them nervous. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for a reaction, but I gave them none. Chris muttered something about contesting it, about proving incompetence, about using Henderson's evaluation to override the will. Jessica whispered back with venom, her words slicing through the morning air. "We need more evidence. He's slipping. Yesterday, he left the stove on. We can build on that. We can show he's dangerous to himself. Then this paper means nothing." Her words cut into me, but I kept my posture relaxed, the act of the frail, distracted old man. I turned another page, sipping cold coffee as though oblivious. In truth, every nerve in my body was tight with anger. The very idea that my own daughter would discuss ways to declare me incompetent, to rob me of dignity and freedom, shook me to my core. Yet anger was fuel, and I held it steady. Later that day, when they believed I was napping, I crept to the vent in the hallway. The house carried their voices like threads. What I heard next was darker than anything before. Jessica's voice hushed but sharp. "We could stage something. If he leaves the gas on, I'll take pictures. If he trips on the stairs, I'll record it. Even better, if we slip a little something into his tea, just enough to make him drowsy. Then we call Henderson. We'll have proof he can't manage alone." Chris chuckled softly, approving of the cruelty. "Yes, one good incident could tip the scales. People see what they're shown. He's old. They'll believe it." I pressed my hand against the wall, my knuckles white. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was plotting not only to steal what I had built, but to harm me in the process. Rage filled me, a fire so strong I had to whisper Margaret's name just to keep control. "Margaret, you were right. They only come when they want. But this is beyond even your warning." My throat tightened, but I forced myself to stay still. They could not know I had heard. They could not suspect the trap was already set. That evening, when Jessica pretended to check on me with gentle notes asking if I wanted more tea, I smiled faintly and shook my head. Let her think I was still blind to her schemes. Let her think I was still the weak old man she imagined. But deep inside, my resolve sharpened like steel. I reached for the phone later that night and called Michael. My son's voice, calm and steady, brought me a measure of peace. I explained in low tones what had happened, what they were planning, and what I needed from him. "Play along," I said. "If Jessica calls, act concerned. Ask questions. Let them think you're on their side. The more they talk, the deeper they bury themselves." Michael agreed without hesitation. "Dad," he said firmly, "they think they've trapped you, but they've trapped themselves. Just hold steady. I'll be ready." The next morning, I made sure the suitcase was in the living room, placed where no one could miss it. When Jessica and Chris walked in, their eyes lit up. Jessica smiled with triumph, the kind of smile that belongs to someone who thinks they've finally won. "So," she said slowly, "you're ready? Ready for Sunset Manor?" Chris clapped his hands together as though a celebration was in order. "Smart move," he said, "finally making the right choice. You'll be safe there, and we can take care of everything else." I lowered my newspaper, my voice calm and steady. "No," I said, "you're the ones who are leaving." Their faces fell in unison, shock painted across them. Jessica stammered, What do you mean?" I folded the paper neatly and set it aside. "I mean, I have heard every word you've said, every plan you made, every insult you threw at me, the old burden, the staged accidents, the poisoned tea, all of it." Jessica's mouth opened, but no words came. Chris tried to recover, his voice high and defensive. "You must have misunderstood. I cut him off with a raised hand. "Don't bother. I heard it all, and I acted. The house, the savings, the investments, all $750,000 of it, is already secure. The will has been changed. The accounts are protected. You have nothing but the shame of what you tried to do." Jessica's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. "Dad, we were just worried about you. We didn't mean—" I stood up slowly, my back straight, my eyes clear. "No, you meant every word. You wrote every lie in that notebook of yours. You planned every cruel step with Henderson. Don't you dare tell me this was a concern. This was greed, plain and simple. Greed and betrayal." Chris's face flushed red, his voice rising. "You can't prove anything," he shouted. I leaned closer, lowering my voice to a calm that carried more weight than any scream. "I don't need to prove it to anyone but myself, and I've proven enough. You've already lost." Jessica's tears finally came, but they were not the tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of plans undone. "Please," she begged, "please don't do this. We just wanted security." I shook my head slowly. "You wanted security by stealing mine, by destroying me, and now you will face the consequences." I pointed to the suitcases by the door. "Those are yours. You'll leave this house today. I won't call the police if you go quietly, but make no mistake, Jessica, you will not set foot in this house again. And if you ever try to touch my accounts or claim my care again, You'll find Robert Henley waiting in court with every piece of evidence he needs." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Chris slammed his hand on the table, rattling the dishes. His voice was bitter, cracking at the edges. "This isn't over," he hissed. Jessica sobbed, clutching at him, but he pulled away and stormed toward the door. She followed, her face pale, her body trembling. They dragged the suitcases out, shoving them into the back of their Ford Escape. I stood at the window, watching as they slammed the trunk shut. Chris shouted something into the wind, words I could barely hear, but the tone was enough, a vow to fight back, to find some other way. I stayed at the window until the car rolled down the street and vanished. My hand rested on the glass, and for the first time in years I felt the weight lifting off my chest. The game they thought they were winning was over. I whispered, "Margaret, it's done. They're gone. And for the first time, I am free." The silence that followed was not heavy, not painful, but peaceful. The kind of silence that comes when a storm has passed and the air is washed clean. The house still carried its echoes, its bitterness, but it was mine again. And I knew deep inside that though the battle was finished, the war had left its mark. The scars would remain, but so would my strength. Tomorrow would bring the reckoning, the aftermath, the lessons I would carry. But tonight, for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to rest. The house was still when I woke, and for the first time in months, maybe even years, it felt like mine again. No whispers through the vents, no footsteps creeping down the hallway, no eyes watching me as though I were prey in my own home. Just silence, clean and unbroken, wrapping around me like a quilt Margaret might have tucked across my shoulders. I lay there for a while, breathing deeply, letting the quiet sink into my bones. This was the aftermath, the part of the storm when the clouds had scattered, and the air tasted sharp with freedom. The night before had been the turning point. Jessica and Chris had carried their suitcases to the Ford Escape and driven off, angry and humiliated. They had left with vows whispered into the wind, words meant to sound strong but dripping with fear. I knew the fight was over. Still, battles leave residue. I sat up slowly, stretched, and whispered into the empty room, "Margaret, they're gone. We did it." My voice cracked on the last words, and I let the tears come. Not tears of weakness, but of release. The grief of betrayal mingled with relief, and together they drained away. That morning I had an appointment with Robert Henley. The man had been my anchor through all of this, and it was time to secure everything so there would be no second chances for Jessica or Chris. I showered, shaved carefully, and put on the blue shirt Margaret had always said made my eyes look younger. Driving into town, I noticed details I had missed for weeks: the maple trees starting to turn, the bakery windows steaming with fresh bread, the old clock tower chiming in the distance. Life had not stopped while I fought in the shadows. It was waiting, steady and patient, for me to return to it. Robert greeted me in his office, his tie a little crooked, his smile warm but tired. "You've been through hell," he said simply. I nodded. We spread the documents across his desk. He confirmed the freeze on the savings account, $180,000, now safe under my sole authority. He had already transferred a portion into a charitable fund in Margaret's name, a scholarship trust for nursing students at the local college. When I saw her name printed there, Margaret L. Anderson Memorial Fund, my breath caught. "She'd like that," I said softly. Robert nodded. "It's permanent. No one can touch it. It's hers, and it will outlive all of us." If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. We reviewed the will again. Every line was clean, airtight. The house, valued at $600,000, was locked into a trust with my son Michael as the sole beneficiary. Investments, $120,000, earmarked for his children's education. Jessica's clause remained, a token of $1,000, the line about reasons she will understand, standing like a gravestone for her choices. Robert tapped the papers. "They may threaten to contest it, but they won't win. You've got documentation, witnesses, and frankly, their behavior, if exposed, will bury them. You're safe." Safe. The word echoed in me. I had not felt safe in my own home for months, maybe years, if I counted the slow erosion of trust. Now the walls felt like walls again, not cages. The floorboards no longer groaned under betrayal, only under time. When I returned home, the room seemed brighter. Without Jessica's sharp perfume lingering or Chris's heavy footsteps, the air smelled like wood polish and the faint lavender soap Margaret once loved. I walked through each room deliberately, touching the walls, the chairs, the frames. The living room no longer held staged kindness. The kitchen counters no longer hid notebooks of lies. My study, where I had planned with Robert, felt like a command center returned to order. I sat at my desk, opened the drawer, and saw Margaret's ring lying beside the sealed documents. I picked it up, turned it slowly between my fingers, and whispered, "We kept it, Maggie. They'll never take what we built." News of Jessica and Chris drifted to me through neighbors and mutual acquaintances. They had taken a small apartment on the other side of town, near the highway. Not the kind of place they were used to, no manicured lawns or wide kitchens, just a two-bedroom box with peeling paint. Word was they were already behind on rent. Chris had lost his contract with the real estate office, and Jessica's friends had begun to distance themselves. People sense desperation, and desperation has a smell. They were floundering. It should have satisfied me, but mostly it brought me clarity. Choices have consequences. I could imagine them in that apartment, Jessica staring at unpaid bills, Chris muttering about unfair systems, both of them too proud to admit the truth. They had gambled on my silence, on my weakness, and they had lost. Now they were paying, and no amount of excuses could soften the blow. I didn't need revenge. Their life was already its own punishment. Meanwhile, I rediscovered something I thought I had lost: peace. In the afternoons, I sat by the window, sunlight slanting across the wood floor, reading books that had gathered dust. I brewed tea without fear of hidden powders. I left the stove burning while I boiled water and smiled at the irony. No accidents, no staged proof, just the steady rhythm of an old man living honestly. Evenings, I listened to music Margaret loved, old vinyl records that cracked and hummed but still carried her voice in the melodies. I talked to her sometimes as if she sat across from me in her chair. "You were right," I'd say. "You always saw through people quicker than I did. I should have listened sooner, but I've listened now." Michael came by more often. He brought his children, their laughter spilling into the rooms like water rushing into a dry well. We planned a trip to Seattle for the spring, a chance to walk the piers, eat clam chowder in sourdough bowls, maybe ride the ferry like we used to when the kids were small. It wasn't just about the destination. It was about reclaiming family, the part that mattered. The betrayal of one child didn't erase the love of another. If anything, it sharpened it, made me cherish Michael more deeply. One evening, after the children had gone to bed upstairs, Michael sat with me in the study. He looked at the papers, the neat stacks Robert had prepared. "Dad," he said, his voice low, "you've done everything right. But do you ever think about forgiving her?" The question landed softly, but heavily. I looked at him for a long time. "Forgiveness is one thing," I said slowly. "Forgetting is another. I can forgive in my heart for my own peace. But I will not forget, and I will not let her near what she tried to destroy. That line in the will, that $1,000, it isn't cruelty. It's a marker, a reminder that choices matter. She has to live with that." Michael nodded. He understood. The phone rang one night. I answered, and the voice on the other end trembled. Jessica. She didn't start with hello. She started with tears. "Dad, I'm sorry. We were desperate. We didn't mean to." I closed my eyes, listening to the words fall like empty shells. "Jessica," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I don't need your apology. I have myself. I have Michael. I have Margaret's memory. I don't need anything from you anymore." There was silence, then a sob, then the line went dead. I set the phone down gently, and for the first time since all this began, I felt entirely free. Free from expectation, free from manipulation, free from guilt that wasn't mine to carry. Days turned into weeks. I tended the garden Margaret once loved, planting marigolds along the walkway, pruning the roses until they bloomed again. Neighbors stopped by to chat, bringing pies or simply sharing stories. I was part of the community again, not a shadow hidden in his own house. The house itself, $600,000 in value, but priceless in memory, stood not just as property, but as a monument. Every board I had hammered, every nail Margaret had painted, every holiday meal shared within those walls, it was all still here, safe. Jessica and Chris faded from conversation. Their names came up less, their presence shrinking until it was little more than a ghost of a bad dream. I imagined them in their small apartment, arguing over bills, trying to claw back status, but always remembering the day they were told to leave. Always remembering the look in my eyes when I told them I had heard everything. That memory would follow them longer than any punishment I could deliver. In contrast, my life expanded. I began volunteering at the local community center, tutoring kids who struggled with math. Some days I cooked meals for the church pantry, stirring big pots of soup and laughing with others who gave their time. Each act reminded me of something vital. Purpose is not found in money alone. It is found in how you use it, how you live with it, and how you pass it forward. Margaret would have smiled at that. I often walked through the park at dusk, watching the sun set behind the lake. Children played, couples strolled, and the world felt ordinary in the best sense of the word. On one of those evenings, I paused on a bench and whispered again to Margaret, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself. I have what matters. Thank you for guiding me through." A breeze lifted, carrying the scent of lilacs, and I felt her presence settle around me. The lessons became clear as days layered into months. For parents, love is not about giving until you are empty. Love requires boundaries, lines that protect your dignity. For children, gratitude is more than words. It is respect, even when money is involved. And for all of us, in this modern world where greed runs fast, the truth is simple. Character outlasts wealth. A person who betrays family for money ends up with neither. A person who holds dignity, even in betrayal, ends up rich in ways money cannot measure. I carried those truths like lanterns, guiding me through each day. When people asked how I was doing, I smiled and said, "I'm lighter now, finally lighter." And it was true. The burden had been lifted. One afternoon, sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found a photograph of Margaret holding baby Jessica. Smiling so wide, her whole face seemed lit from inside. I held it for a long time, the ache sharp but clean. Love had been real once. Choices had twisted it, but the love was still there in that picture. I placed it in a frame and set it on the mantel, not as a reminder of pain, but as a reminder that even broken things had beginnings worth cherishing. As I closed that day, I whispered again, "I don't need her apology. I have myself. I have you, Maggie. That's enough." The house glowed softly in the evening light, no longer haunted by betrayal, but filled with peace. And in that peace, I knew the story wasn't just ending. It was beginning again. New chapters waited, trips with Michael, laughter with the grandchildren, work at the community center. Life had turned a corner, and I was walking into it freely. The mornings are quieter now, and the quiet feels different from how it once did. It is no longer heavy and silent, filled with suspicion and fear. It is gentle silence, the kind that comes when life has finally settled, when the storm has passed, and the ground is soft again. I wake up, open the curtains of my small but warm house, and sunlight spills across the floorboards. I breathe deeply, reminding myself that peace is not something given. It is something fought for, something earned. And after everything that has happened, I know I have finally earned it. The first weeks of this new chapter of my life were filled with simple tasks that carried enormous meaning. I joined a volunteer group at the community center, helping pack food boxes for families who were struggling. At first, I was nervous, unsure if I still belonged anywhere outside my own home. But soon I found myself laughing with people younger than me, trading stories with other retirees, sharing meals after long afternoons of work. There was warmth in their company, no hidden motives, no whispered betrayal. Just people choosing to stand together, to care for one another in ways money could never buy. Back at home, I turned to the garden that Margaret once adored. The rose bushes had grown wild during the months when Jessica and Chris filled this house with their games, but now I had the time and the peace of mind to tend them. I pruned, watered, and cleared weeds, and by late spring they bloomed, full and fragrant. Every blossom felt like a message from her, a quiet reminder that beauty survives even after harsh winters. When the grandchildren visited, they ran along the garden paths, their laughter echoing in the air, and I realized that life had circled back to something whole again. Spending time with the grandchildren reminded me of the true wealth of life. We baked cookies together, chocolate chip like Margaret used to make, and the smell filled the kitchen with memories. They asked me about their grandmother, and I told them stories, how she danced barefoot in the kitchen, how she hummed when she worked in the garden, how her laugh could light up a room. I wanted them to know the love that had once built this family, even if betrayal had cracked part of its foundation. The cracks did not erase the beauty. They simply reminded us to value what remained. In those quiet evenings, I thought often about the lessons this journey had carved into me. For parents, I realized the hardest truth. We must never confuse sacrifice with indulgence. Loving our children does not mean erasing every consequence of their choices. I had poured money into Jessica's education, into her first car, into her wedding, believing that generosity would secure gratitude. It hadn't. Love must come with boundaries, or else it turns into weakness. Parents need to remember that saying no is sometimes the purest form of love, the only way to teach respect. For children, the lesson is even sharper. The love of a parent is not an entitlement, not a credit line to exploit. It is a gift that deserves care and honor. When children see their parents only as a source of money, they destroy the very bond that gives them strength. Jessica learned too late that betrayal is a debt that cannot be repaid with apologies. Her choices had cost her more than her inheritance. They had cost her trust, belonging, and family. And for all of us living in this modern world, the lesson stands tall. Greed can unravel even the strongest ties, but truth and character will outlast every lie. Wealth can be stolen, twisted, and hidden. But integrity, the simple act of standing up for yourself, of living with honesty, remains untouchable. I held on to that, day after day, letting it guide me. One afternoon, the mail arrived, and inside was an envelope with Jessica's handwriting. My chest tightened at the sight of it. I sat at the table, the envelope heavy in my hands, but I did not open it. I knew what would be inside. Pages of apologies, words designed to mend, words that could never undo. I placed it in the drawer of my desk beside Margaret's ring and whispered aloud, "I don't need your apology. I have my life. I have myself." Saying it out loud gave me strength. That drawer could hold her words forever, sealed away while I lived free. News of Jessica and Chris reached me in fragments. They still lived in the small apartment by the highway, struggling with bills, their reputation in shambles. Chris had been let go from another job, and Jessica, once proud and loud, now worked part-time in a shop just to stay afloat. They had tried to contact me more than once, but each time I declined. The phone would ring or a message would arrive, and I simply let it pass. They had made their bed, and now they lived in it. I did not hate them. Hate is a chain. I simply chose not to engage. Some doors, once closed, must stay closed for peace to remain. The contrast between our lives grew sharper with time. While they struggled, I thrived. Not in riches, not in luxury, but in spirit. I had evenings filled with laughter from neighbors, afternoons filled with the joy of grandchildren, mornings filled with the calm of coffee on the porch. They had noise, arguments, and the heavy weight of failure. The difference was not a chance. It was a choice. One day, while volunteering at the center, I met a young man who had just lost his father. He asked me quietly, "Does it ever get easier, losing someone you love and being betrayed by others?" I placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "Pain doesn't disappear, but it changes. It becomes a teacher. It shows you who you are and what you're willing to stand for. And betrayal teaches you the value of boundaries. Remember this, your dignity is your most precious asset. Guard it. Don't give it away, not even to family." He nodded, his eyes filling with tears, and I realized in that moment that my story, painful as it had been, had a purpose beyond myself. I often walked in the park near my house, the same one where Margaret and I used to stroll years ago. The benches were old now, the paint chipped, but the trees had grown tall, shading the paths in green light. On one of those evenings, I sat there as the sun set, golden light spilling across the lake. I whispered to myself, "I finally found where I belong." The words felt true, solid, unshakable. Every day since then has been a testament that I chose the right path. The final lesson, the one that ties everything together, is simple but profound. Family is not defined by blood alone. Family is defined by respect. Those who respect you are your family. Those who betray you are simply people who share your name. And character, the one thing no one can steal, is the legacy that will outlive us all. So here I sit, a man who once nearly lost everything but found more than he imagined. I found dignity. I found peace. I found the courage to let go of what was toxic and hold on to what was true. Jessica may send more letters. Chris may make more excuses. But I will not answer. That chapter is closed. The book is written. My story now belongs to me, not to their greed. I close my eyes and see Margaret's face, the way she smiled at me across the dinner table, the way she reached for my hand when life was hard. I whisper, "I did it, Maggie. I chose us. I chose the values we built this home on. They can't touch us now." A breeze rustles through the trees outside, and for a moment I swear I feel her hand in mine. As I rise to head back home, the park glowing in twilight, I realize that peace is not the absence of pain. It is the presence of purpose. And I have found mine again. The story has come to an end. It has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.